This is J. Krishnamurti's third discussion with students at Brandeis University, 1968.
Could we talk about whether education has any significance at all? Could we? It won't be too much. I used to know a boy who was extraordinarily brilliant. He took PhD in mathematics, law, philosophy, and several other MA in this and MA in that. Extraordinary brain he had. Very clever. And he came to see me one day and he said, I don't know quite why I'm going through all these exams and I don't know what to do in life. I've been very carefully conditioned in these subjects, but there is this whole vast field of life of which I know nothing. And he married and went off his head. Not because he married. And he's in a mental hospital now. And I know several such cases. So one asks, what's the point of it all? I don't want to depress you or anything of that kind, but I'm sure you must have asked this. The more intelligent and more alert one is, one must inevitably ask this question. What is it all about? Just to end up in an office as a lawyer, doctor, a physicist, this or that. Become specialized in one subject and disregard all the rest of the field of life. We are educated, aren't we, to certain field, educated to function in a certain field. As a professional in this or in that. And we seem to neglect or disregard the various other fields of activity and living. So if one asks, what is it all about? One really has no answer, except a clever, cunning answer, which has really no validity at all. But if one is at all serious, and the times and the epoch demand that one be serious, not utterly frivolous, one must, it seems to me, inevitably ask this question. Either one becomes an activist, trying to reform, trying to do, trying to change. And disregard a life that may be entirely different, that may include reform, change, political activity and so on. So if one could ask oneself, what is this? What is it all about? What is this life about? Why is one educated? Go through this tremendous torture. And it is a torture. School, university, degrees, exams, the nervousness and the fear of all of that. And then get a job, if one is lucky. In India it is something appalling. I was told that there was an advertisement in a paper for a cook. And I do not know how many thousand MAs and BAs turned up. You may laugh, it's a tragedy there. And here, with this extraordinary prosperity, end up as a clerk or a professor or an executive or a vice president, and then what? Money, cars, bigger houses, bathtubs or showers, more and more and more. And then what? And of course there is always old age and death, that's the... So when one sees all this, not only in Europe but in this country, and this pattern is being repeated all over the world, aren't you all concerned? Not intellectually, but intimately. Involved in this enormous problem. Either one drops out, and therefore the trouble, one has other kinds of trouble, or one pursues this well-worn path and decays, withers away. And is all that life? Is that the only thing? Or join some pet sectarian group, vegetarian or this or that, and fight for it or struggle for it, do propaganda and all that. As one grows older, one's own particular idiosyncrasies increase, solidify, and it's very difficult to break through. And one has hardly any love in one's life. One may have sex, pleasure, but is pleasure sex? Is pleasure love? And one has worshipped thought in the world, especially in India at a certain period. To them, thought, conceptual thinking and ideology was the most important thing, and as it is here too. So, where are we? Is there a different way of living? At a different dimension? Not theoretically, not verbally or intellectual, but actually. Be totally an outsider to all this. Outsider, outside of society, outside the established order, established pattern of existence and life and activity. Or is one caught in this everlasting trap? One can revolt against this trap, against this pattern of life. But that revolt is a reaction which creates its own pattern. Long hair, short skirt or long skirt, beards and all the rest of it. But that doesn't change the human mind. So that it seems to me that's one of the most important things that one has to confront, one has to face. And where is this revolution to take place? Out there or in oneself? And is change a modified continuity of what has been, or a total mutation, not biologically, but psychologically? And if one is to psychologically be in a state of revolution, one must obviously have deep knowing of oneself, not according to any particular philosophy or specialist or psychologist, but then one doesn't know oneself. One knows what others have said about oneself. But to know oneself is, after all, the basis of all action. If I don't know myself, I have no raison d'être. have no means of perception. And this change within oneself, brought about by influence, by pressure, by a motive. And if it is based on a motive, pressure, environment, then it's not obviously a change at all. If one forces me to do something, and I do it, it is just, I'm incapable of clarity. I'm only obeying order. So change in the human mind is so immensely important. And this change implies great discipline. Not the discipline of drill, conformity and suppression. It implies great austerity. Not the austerity of the priest, the harshness of the priest or of the saint. And now, more and more throughout the world, one spits on the idea of virtue. So you have all this, and I hope you're on board by all this. You have this great field in front of us with all its complexity. And society, organized society, is becoming more and more powerful. Bureaucracy is becoming all important. An economic revolution or social revolution inevitably falls into the hands of bureaucracy. And we are caught again, as what is happening in Russia, in the highly organized societies. There is hardly any freedom. Like in India, I'm not advocating it, I'm merely pointing it out. India is thoroughly inefficient. Thoroughly, thank God. You can do what you like, starve to death, withdraw from society, go wander in a monk's robe from village to village for the rest of your life. There is no draft conscription. It is too vast to conscript an ignorant society. And the leaders are inefficient, and the people are inefficient. But they need food, clothes and shelter. And nationality and sovereign government is going to solve that. It's a universal problem. But each especially in Asia and Africa, the nationalism is violent. Either politically, we are concerned with the unity of mankind, not dependent on politicians. Of course, politicians can never bring about unity of mankind. They want to keep things separate as this party and that party, that society, and so on. So when one regards all this, there is utter lack of compassion, which has nothing to do with sentimentality and emotionalism. Nobody cares for another. And if you do care, you join an organization to do something about it. And you're caught in that organization again. So the more one is organized, the less significance as a human being. And as we human beings now have no meaning at all, we invent meaning, we invent a purpose. The more intellectual you are, the greater the invention to give a significance to life. Existentialists, the Buddhists, the Zen, this, that, and the other. And we swallow that pill, hoping thereby to have some significance in our life. But there are words, and you cannot live on words. And man, right throughout the world, is in great sorrow. Perhaps you don't, one may have it in the university level, or perhaps later on in life. There is the sorrow of death and the sorrow of life. And again one is caught in it. And the Christian world worships sorrow. So these are the many problems that one is confronted with. Not something invented by any philosopher, but there it is right in front of our noses. And education, science, religion, all the clever intellectuals in the world have not been able to solve this. And therefore, it's absurd to look to them. One has to start with oneself, not as an individual opposed to the community, to the society, to other human beings, but as human beings one has to start. As though totally anew. And find out what it means to love. What place has pleasure in this love? what it means to end sorrow, which means fear, what it means to find out for oneself what place has thought, whether it has any place at all except at the professional level. And what is the meaning of life and death? Perhaps all this is a little bit too serious on a lovely afternoon. Probably you will listen to all this with half attention. Rather bored to be reminded of all this complex living, and when you leave this room, go back to the routine of life. But since you are good enough to ask me to talk, I have bombarded you with all this. Not as a specialist, not as a Hindu bringing some peculiar Oriental philosophy or ideologies, done not worth a straw. I think it is possible, not possible. The word possible is really shouldn't exist. There is definitely a different dimension at which one must live. A different way of living. And that cannot possibly be taught by another. One has to be for oneself both the teacher and the disciple. Because the teacher is learning, and so is the disciple learning. When the teacher says he knows, he doesn't know. There is only the act of learning, not from a book, that any computer can do that. Learning about oneself, what one is, the world is. One is confused, afraid, miserable, frightened, everlastingly seeking security, psychologically. So we create a society which is of all this. So we are the world, and the world is us. Right, Senator. Take my coat off.
Are you familiar with the New Left movement in this country, and if so, what do you think of it?
But what's up?
Are you familiar with the New Left movement in this country?
Are you familiar with the new left of the in this country? And what do you think about it? I don't know it. I've read a little bit about it, but that's the reaction to the right. like communism is the reaction to capitalism. And when the circle ends, they're unrecognizable from one from the other. Both become the bourgeois. And so on, with all this. You're quite familiar with all this.
On Friday's talk, you mentioned not reading, that you don't read anymore. How literally should I take that?
If I may say so, take it literally. I've never read any philosophy, either Hindu or Western. No psychological books. I was at school in England and all the rest of it, where one reads the ordinary books, you know. But I've never read any of the so-called sacred literature. Perhaps I've read a little more of the Old Testament. Not because of what it says, but because of the beautiful English in it. Apart from that, I haven't read anything. And that's literally so. So, one has to take the journey oneself. Everything has failed around us, which is not exaggeration, it is so. Religions have finished. Science, one hoped at one time, would do something, change. It hasn't. Education hasn't. Leaders have not. The gurus, everything has failed. And one has no trust in anything anymore. One doubts everything, and one must. Including speaker, I hope. And when one is literally in that state, one has to explore. And the field of exploration is the me, the myself, nobody else. Because the me is the other me. And to explore, one needs freedom. You can't explore with a lot of belief, fears. One must, in the very process of exploration, one discovers all this. So one finds that the whole of mankind, the past, the present, is oneself. And when one begins to inquire into oneself, not according to Freud, Youre, or any of them, then one discovers great many things. And so one can discard these so-called books, except technological books and all the rest of it, but other books, what other people have said, what they say about God, if there is God, if there is no God, if God is dead, if this is so. One has to find out what place has belief. Why should one have belief in anything at all? Because where man has had belief in a different world, in heaven, in hell, in God, in those beliefs which are ideologies. The Catholic ideology and their belief dogma has created such mischief. The Muslim, the Hindu, they've all brought about division. So if one knows how to read the book of oneself and learn all the treasure there. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Is it possible for you to demonstrate in some way what you were talking about yesterday, the process of meditation, rather than to talk about it? Can we in some way go through it with you, rather than hearing you tell us what this process is?
So when we use the word process, what does that mean? A method? A system? All right. Then how is one to meditate? Is that it?
But can we do it together?
Definitely. That means, can your mind and my mind and any mind be completely still? Not for a split second, but actually still. So the mind doesn't chatter at all. The thoughts don't go all over the place. Can you do it? I'm not testing you, so please.
I understand.
Can you do it? No. Why not? Why should the word, which is thought, the idea, why should thought interfere? You follow, sir? Why should thought wander off? And so they say, concentrate. You follow, sir? Control it. Put it down. That's no good at all. That's a bad thing. It wants to go off there and you pull it back. And you keep this game going. It's a waste of energy. But if one sees that the ending of thought is possible only when you know the origin of thought. I don't know. That is, to be aware how thought begins. And being aware of how thought begins, there, in that very awareness, thought comes to an end. I don't know if you follow. Not how to control thought. And also, I'll just describe a little bit. And also your body must be quiet. In the right posture, which you can lie down in bed or sit straight or in a chair or ground. Because if you slouch, sit in a slack fashion, the blood doesn't go to the head properly. It's obvious. So you must sit very quietly or lie down very quietly. Not force it. Because the body has its own intelligence. if it's not interfered by the mind. You understand? Because we have spoiled the intelligence of the body through our own particular tastes and tongue and sights and excitement. I don't know if you're interested. So, the body must be quiet. And therefore, when it's quiet, it must be very sensitive. Therefore, the drinking, smoking, eating meat, follow all that subsides, must subside. And then the mind, in which is the brain is the result of the past, obviously. It's loaded with memories. And from those memories, thought springs. I see somebody, girl, I say, how nice. And so on, so on, so on. So, the beginning of thought, if one is alert, one can find it. You understand, sir? How it begins, the origin of it. And in the very awareness of that fact, thought subsides. Not at the end, you prefer. Not thinking and then controlling. So the mind becomes very quiet. The body, the mind becomes extraordinarily quiet. And this quietness means sensitivity. Because otherwise you can be like a log and be quiet. But to be quiet implies sensitivity. How you walk, talk, and all the rest. And when the mind is quiet, completely, which means the deeper layers as well as the conscious mind are quiet. I don't know. So the whole entity is quiet. And completely silent. This silence is not the product of drugs, tranquilizers, repetition of words, all that stuff. That is nothing. Like the Zen, they have, not that I've read it, I've talked to great many people of all these categories. They give you a problem, in most difficult problem. How did a living goose get into a bottle or something? And you have no answer. Therefore the mind is shocked to silence. But that's not silence. So one has to understand how the mind is caught by the word, by word. Thought. All the conflict of duality. Wanting, not wanting, all that. When one has really, actually understood, not verbally or intellectual, but actually has stopped it, all that has come to an end, then the fun of meditation begins. Then there is joy in it, which is entirely different from pleasure.
In your description of meditation that I've heard you give, there seem to be two qualities that are important. One is the capacity for self-observation. And the other is a capacity to be impartial about that which is observed.
Yes, sir.
I think my question is I think that is right, but it is very difficult to do in the circumstances of the life that most of us live in. Is there a way that one can begin that capacity to observe oneself
Sir,
impartially?
the word capacity implies cultivation, doesn't it?
Yes.
And therefore time. I have to have time to learn a language. Months, years, whatever it is. And is observation impartial, not evaluating, to observe? Is that a matter of capacity? Is that a matter of time, cultivation? Or it takes place when you look at a tree and all the image, knowledge of thought of the tree arises. At that moment, to watch, to see whether the mind can look without the word. Not cultivated. To see your friend, your wife, your husband, your neighbor, whoever it is, to see without the image. And when the image appears, go into it immediately. You understand, sir? Go into it, find out where it comes, what is the machinery that builds the images. And that you break it down immediately. That you see instantly without the image. I don't know if you're following. I think most of us, if I may point out, I'm not being impudent, are rather indolent, lazy. We see the image that one has about oneself or about another, and we go on living with these images. And we don't see what mischief these images do. And to break it down, one has to apply immediately when it arises. And that requires attention. And the immediacy and the urgency of it is thwarted by indolence. And so we think it is a capacity that must be cultivated through time, through gradually I'll get it, and so on, so on.
Well, we live in time.
With what?
We live in time. Most of the time.
What is time, sir? Apart from the watch, which is chronological time, is there any other time? Actually. There is time psychologically when I say I shall be, right? I am this and I shall be that. To be that, there must be many days, an interval of time, no? So we have this idea of gradually acquiring that. I am violent, I invent a state or an ideology which is called non-violence, and I am practicing non-violence. And in the meantime, I am violent. And this interval between what I am, which is violence, and the ideological state of non-violence, this interval, this gap, is time. I don't know if you... And that's our life. One day I'll be the greatest hero. One day I shall be perfect, whatever that may mean. One day I shall reach God or nirvana or heaven or whatever it is. But the fact is, what is? I am violent. There is violence. That's the only fact. The duality is not a fact. When one discards duality, then what is violence? I don't know if you're interested in all this. Is this too much of an afternoon? If I discard non-violence, and discard in the sense, not only verbally, but actually I don't look to non-violence. There is only violence. Do I know violence through non-violence? You understand what? How do I know violence? Do I know violence through the word which says, I'm violent? You follow? Or do I know violence not through the word, not through the description, not through its opposite? How do I know it? If all the opposite, not the word, not the ideological associated significance to that word, how do I know I'm violent? And can I look at that feeling of violence without the observer and the observed? I don't know if you're all interested. Can I look at that tree without the observer? The observer being the image. Can I look at that tree without any image, without any center? Have you tried it sometime, if you will, to look at something, not merely the objective things, but subject inwardly, without the image, without the word, without thought?
I'm forced back to books because about 3 years ago I read a few of your books and they were very influential and helpful.
So what am I to do? It's my fault. So, if there was no book, please do listen, no book, no teacher, no guide, nothing, right? You're faced with this. You're faced with this life as it is. The violence, the brutality, the contradictions, the ambitions, the search for power, position, prestige, security, jealousy, and you follow? You're faced with all this. And you have to resolve it. Contestable, I'm sorry, I'm part of this human structure. I don't know what to do with it. I go along with it, and I can't find a way. You've got to solve it. And there's nobody on earth going to tell you what to do. We never put ourselves that challenge. Because one is afraid to be alone. And as we said, one must be an outsider. One must be alone. Psychologically, inwardly, you may have friends and all the rest of it, but inwardly, completely alone. Which is not isolation, a neurotic state. Love is alone, isn't it? Love which is not pleasure, not hate.
Well, if love is alone, then is nothing together? And how does one structure one's life as a social animal?
What do you mean? May I ask what you mean by social animal? Live in this society?
Well, would possibly with the need to share, to give of oneself.
Wait, what does one give of oneself?
Well, hopefully love.
And when it is refused,
One has to keep working at it.
there we are. I want to give my love to you. You want to give your love to somebody else. I'm jealous, I'm anxious, I'm frightened, I'm lonely, I'm miserable. I hate the other.
I was thinking of it in a more general sense.
Wait.
Oh, excuse me.
Begin with little. We spread out afterwards. If I don't know what love is, how can I spread it generally? If I don't know how to love my wife or husband or the tree or the cloud or the autumnal leaf, without hate, without fear, without anxiety, without guilt, without, you follow? How can I be a social animal? We are not social animals. We hate each other. Otherwise we would have no wars. Otherwise there would be no black and white in this country. Problem. If every mother really loved the child, do you think there would be a war? They don't love their children. if every mother, parent throughout the world felt the responsibility for their children, not merely to send to school and get an exam, pass an exam, get a job, but the responsibility of being a human being, not to kill, to consider, to have compassion, would stop wars tomorrow. And that is prevented by the politician, by the vested interest of the army. And have I to be a social animal to fit into this society?
But isn't part of taking this concern for your child, this quality of concern for your child, an act of being, of socializing?
It is, if I really love my child.
Yes.
If I see that he's not made a butcher, he's not butcher when he grows to 20, 18, drilled as a soldier. Then I'm really a social entity. Now we have the superstructure without love. Tremendous organization that is destroying us.
You say the self is alone, yet if you fully know yourself, doesn't this aloneness include everything?
Madam, why do you ask? Find out. You see, when you love, I'm sorry to use that word, it's been so spoiled, but one must use it. When you love, do you say, well, I love one and not many? Or do you say, I love the many, not the one? Love is like a perfume, it's there. Give it to many or to one, it doesn't, there it is. And the idea of giving your love to somebody, the flower doesn't think so. Flower has perfume. If you want to go and smell it, go and smell it. It doesn't care. We are so vain, we want to give everything.
When you say love, you're talking about what love is not. Many things, not jealousy, not possession, not hate. And I went home. The list got longer and longer.
Yes, sir.
I said, well, what is it?
So as we said the other day, through negation one comes to the positive. Through denying what it is not, it is. Right? I don't know what love is. I won't accept the traditional morality and the statements or sanctions of love about by the priest, by all the society. I don't know what it means. Right? So, I know what it is not. I know it's not hate. I know it's not to kill somebody in the name of my country, in the name of God, in the name of all my vested interests. That's not love. Love is not jealousy, anger. Right? And I must get rid of them, push them away. So love has no opposite. Right? Which doesn't mean there is not man or woman, sex and all the rest of it. Love has no opposite to itself. Therefore, when the mind is freed from all this, it is there. I don't have even to look for it.
you said yesterday that there was a necessary connection between love and death. Could you explain that a little more clearly? There's a step missing in between somewhere, at least for me.
So what is death? I know the organism dies, inevitably. The scientists may prolong it for another 50 years and God knows why, but they can. And the organism, by constant strain, usage, disease, old age, comes to an end. Is that what is death? Is that what one is frightened of? Or is one frightened of not being? Psychologically, not being. And is it possible to die every day to everything that you know? That is, die to every image of pleasure and pain. Die to all that. It's only when the mind is dead to the past, the mind is innocent, right? And it's only the innocent mind that knows love. Not the mind that hates, that is frightened, that is seeking security, comfort, all the rest of it. If one can end all that, that is to die to all that, then the mind is fresh, young, innocent. It's only such a mind that can love, obviously. That has love, not can.
See any hope for universities, especially in this country? Any hope for universities? Any fruitful direction?
I'm in a university, I must be careful. I don't.
And yet it is universities where you are appearing mostly now.
Only recently, sir.
What happened?
I don't know.
We can't be all bad.
I'm not saying that all. So life as it is lived, or as it has been lived, conditions every human being. Education conditions us. Doesn't free us. Puts us into a different mold, different structure of thought. As I was saying, I knew this boy. What? Highly educated, so-called educated. Could quote to you most extraordinary things, good grade. But the rest of the field he doesn't know a thing about. The vast field of life, none. If education is not only to cultivate memory, but also to inquire into this complex process of living, to understand it, to live with it, to live differently, to live at a different dimension. Then education has meaning. I do not know if you are aware, sirs, take a country like India, where there is population of 550 million, and every year 12 million people are added. They can't all be educated. And what's going to happen to those who are not educated? Remain slaves? Become farmers? And perhaps a new way of living might be found, which includes them. That they need not necessarily go through university, college. Must I go through a university to learn about life? I may go through a university to get a job, which is part of life, but that's not the whole of life. And the whole of life contains the part, but the part does not contain the whole. So if I understand the whole, death, love, beauty, pleasure, fear, anxiety, all that, this enormous struggle of man, if I understand all that, the vastness, then I understand the relative position of universities.
When you understand all that, what do you do about the 12 million annual increment in the population?
So they're trying to have birth control, the pill. And the religion and the economic condition of India says, I must have more children, I must have a boy who will earn a livelihood, keep the farm for my old age. There is no social security. So it's a battle now between overpopulation and the limited means of food and all that. And that problem, they want to solve it according to political economic ways, that is, the ideologies are more important than feeding the people. Right? The communist says you must feed them according to my way, right? The capitalist according to his way. And they're not concerned about human beings being fed, clothed, looked after. To them, ideologies are much more important than the human. And so there is more misery. You know, in India, I see great many politicians, prominent ones. I don't know why they come to see me, they do. I have talked about all this. Oh, they say, well, this is not for us, you know, so go and talk somewhere else.
Sir, I have a couple of questions. I guess you may feel they're impudent.
No, sir. Please, sir.
But why exactly, I know you must have had many alternatives and you've chosen this, you know, as your way of life, whatever this is. But I'm curious, first of all, you know, what makes you lecture in the college circuit now? You know, you are lecturing mostly to colleges now.
No, sir.
You know, why do you lecture? Why do you bother to lecture?
Why do you
Because-
talk at all? Well, like in the university or outside at Cyril. Why do you talk? Is that it?
Yes, because there's such a tremendous gulf, you know, between the great duality between people in this room and you. All the questions on how do we do it? You know, how can we do
Understand?
it?
Why do you
What way?
talk? Why do you talk? Right? No? Then what's the question?
That's the question. You know, why have you chosen this alternative above all the others?
Ah, I have not chosen it. Only a mind that's confused chooses. Right? When you see something very clearly, what need there be for choice? It's only when I don't see clearly that I choose, ask, find out. Choice implies confusion. Sorry. So when you say, why did you choose this way of teaching, why talking? I didn't choose it. I was doing it when I was a boy, 15. Sorry. And I've been doing it for 40 years and more. But also I think there is only one profession that's worthwhile now, which is to teach. Not subjects, not a particular way of life, but to teach and therefore learn a different way of life. Have I answered your question, sir?
Yes and no.
Why no, sir?
Mainly because I'm confused. I'm not quite sure. I can't articulate it. There's my confusion.
So why are we confused? Not you, sir, I'm not saying. Why are human beings confused? First of all, there is the contradictory desires in ourselves, the contradictory opposing purposes, motives. And these contradictory states are self-contradictory. So that's one thing. And also, we have been told, educated, our tradition is opposed to a different way of living. Experts say, think this, don't think that. And the experts themselves contradict each other. So we are caught in this enormous contradiction, war, peace, hate, love, and so on. And also we find in ourselves self-contradiction. I want to live at peace with everybody and I can't. I hate somebody, I dislike somebody. So, I have given my faith to various teachers, leaders, and so on. They have faith. I don't trust anybody anymore. Whatever they promise, whatever they offer. So, all taken this whole thing, I realize how extraordinarily confused I am. And out of this confusion, I act, I choose. Whatever action I do leads further confusion. So I realize choice is an indication of my own confusion. So can my mind, which has been conditioned, which has been in this state of confusion, can my mind become clear? And how am I to make it clear? How is the mind to make itself clear?
I would like to ask a question. You had mentioned earlier, maybe humorously, that it was true that scientists could extend human life maybe 50 years. And then you added, and I don't know why they would want to. And that suggests that in the long run, or even in the short run, you would see this as an irrelevancy, of no value. And is that
Just if we live as we are living, killing each other, hating each other, being polite to each other, but not at all, but really angry, what's the point of it all, extending another 50 years?
Could one not get into the position of feeling under those circumstances was a good thing?
For who?
For those who get killed off, it terminates this unpleasant life.
For me, sir, if scientist extends my life or the life of the peasant or the factory worker or the executive leader and so on, they'll carry on in the pattern, won't they?
If we terminate it early, it'll be very difficult to change. If we terminate it early, it'll be very difficult to change the pattern.
And so, you're going to bring about a change through time, through a number of years.
And one has to stay alive during those years.
So is change a matter of time?
You said it was.
No. Sorry, there must have been some misunderstanding.
But actually, this is really off the point, because what I was asking is whether you would not, and there's no reason why you should, whether you would not concede that life is a value itself.
Oh yes, sir. Because, I would let everybody live as long as they want to, as long as they, it's not my, of course. But I say, look, to live properly, one must end sorrow, one must end fear.
I'm suggesting that half a loaf is better than no bread.
Oh, well, that's not good enough. It's like telling a prisoner, you'll be free someday.
No, I'm not saying it's good enough, I'm saying it's better than the worst alternative.
Freedom, sir, is freedom something better? Is freedom a matter of time and so on? Surely the better is the enemy of the best, of the good. But I won't go to.
Can one see the whole without one of the parts? And what if one of the parts happens to be education for a particular job?
I said, one must see the whole and then the part has an importance. But to merely encourage, spend years on the part and not look at the whole becomes lopsided.
But can you see the whole if you don't have the parts yet?
Oh, obviously. Does the wheel exist? Do the spokes make the wheel? The parts make the wheel? There must be the concept or the understanding of the circle. Then the parts have meaning. But without understanding the whole field of existence, merely to encourage the part, whether science or whatever it is, must inevitably lead to every kind of disaster.
Would you like to stop now?
What's that?
Would you like to stop now?
I will stop, right? Is that enough?